Okay, we are here this afternoon. I want to welcome you to the program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program. And although we don't have our music this afternoon, we're going to go forward with the program anyway. And we're just delighted to have you out there with us. We're going to talk about a couple of topics this afternoon, one of which is the article I just put on Facebook, which has to do with what is happening with the group called IS, also ISIS, ISIL, the Islamic State. And I just put an article on Facebook that deals with what I think is something that's not being discussed, but I think is very real in terms of its application to what's taking place in our foreign policy, and that is that we're being used as mercenaries over in the Middle East. And there was an article that came out yesterday was saying that John Kerry had been on a whirlwind tour, and you would have thought by them saying that it was a whirlwind tour that meant that he had met with some success. But when I read on the article and then went to the chart that they had on another post to see what were the buy-ins, what were the commitments made by those countries in whose name this coalition, quote unquote, is being formed. These are allies that the United States supposedly has. I want to see what did they buy into. And when I saw on that chart, it had about 5 items across the top. Then it had the nations down underneath, and the question was, are they doing this? It might have been committing money to the coalition. So you saw the United States in all the categories. The box was being checked with the word yes. There was not another country that had check marks of yes in all the other categories. And some of them were putting down, some of them were NA, meaning not applicable. And the coalition is really one in the making. We don't have a coalition. We have the United States taking the lead, and they're pushing us forward to do the bidding of the countries that are not really willing to be in the forefront of that movement to save their own national interests, to resolve the problem they're facing by ISIS, which, according to reports, is not really a threat at this point to the United States. Although I understand that could be something in the future developments. But it's really interesting that we are the ones in the vanguard of this effort to quiet those forces that we're now seeing cutting the heads off of people trying to get the British to come out of the alliance with the quote-unquote Big Satan, and just simply doing all kinds of barbaric things and trying to demoralize the West with this brutality that's unheard of in terms of what we're seeing anywhere else on the planet. And so I think that what that article was actually talking about and dealing with is that we don't have anyone really willing to do the heavy work, the heavy lifting. And one of the problems that is taking place is that we don't have any strong allies in Europe, and we certainly don't have any strong allies in the Middle East, because number one, let's take the Middle East first. The Middle East is really this is a sectarian war between the Shiites and the Sunnis, and those two groups basically are fighting over which of the two is going to be over the bringing about what they both are trying to bring about, and that is the Islamic State. So although ISIL or ISIS or IS has the name of saying the Islamic State, that is not at variance with the outlook and the end result is sought by all of the ones out there who are these players, whether they're Shiites or Sunnis. None of them are going to disagree that that is the ultimate result that they seek. And so I was saying today on Facebook that the best thing we could do really is stay on the sideline, because there are no good forces in this. There are no good horses in this race, and there are no forces that a country that stands for the things this country stands for can back based upon the ideals, quote unquote, that's being pushed by both sides. I noticed last week the president was saying in his address to the nation, 15 minutes, as he spoke to the nation last Wednesday. The president was saying that ISIS, or is the Islamic State, is also killing Muslims. So he said that cannot, therefore that rules out that this could be a group that is Islamic, because they're killing Muslims also. And I don't take that comment as anything other than cover for what I think this president is actually doing, and that is this president is trying to put radical Islamists in power in the Middle East. You can call it Arab Spring, or you can call it all these other things we're talking about in terms of putting democracy down in that part of the world. They have no tradition of democracy in that part of the world, and really the ideas they have is totally at variance with democracy, and they say so. We don't want democracy.
Can you hear me?
We want Sharia law. We want Islam.
Can you hear me?
So I'm having a problem hearing you, John.
Okay, I was going to say, he just goes to show everything he says and does, it to me just proves that his statement that he'd stand with the Muslims in his book that he stated, he's doing everything. That's the only promise he's kept so far, is to stick with the Muslims. That's all he's done.
Yeah. Well, we've got to go into analysis of what is taking place here, because there is more going on here than is on the surface and meets the eye. There's a lot going on in the background. And the idea that these groups are attacking Muslims as if that makes them un-Islamic fails to take into consideration the facts that there has been a fight going on between the two factions, the two basic factions of Islam, since 632 when the Prophet died. And that fighting began almost immediately after the Prophet's death by the fact that there was one group that was claiming that the line of descendancy would come through Abu Bakr, who was the father of Aisha, the Prophet's favorite wife, his third wife, the one that he married at 6 years of age and then consummated the marriage at 9. That was his favorite wife. And her father, the Prophet's father-in-law, was the one that Aisha said should be the line that's followed as a line that would descend from Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and that was one of the two sides in this argument. The other side was the Shiite side that said that it should come through one of the relatives of the Prophet Muhammad, and that he had in fact designated his uncle, I think it was, or his nephew, one of the two, but it would come through Ali. And so this tension between the two claims goes back to the 7th century. There's nothing new in terms of the warfare between the two. And this sectarian violence that we're looking at right now, where the president was saying, well, they're even killing Muslims, that's not anything that hasn't happened over the millennium. And I think the president's aware of that. So that was a smokescreen the president was using, because that was not anything different. And if he says that then makes them un-Islamic, then there's no Muslim group in the Middle East that's Islamic, because these factions have been doing that over the last, how many years would that be if you say that the Prophet died in 632, having been born in 570? How many years would that be? How many centuries would that be? There would be going on 14 centuries. So that doesn't explain why they are not an Islamic group. Couldn't explain it. Because what's hidden is that you have these kinds of attacks going on all the time. Some of it because they have a different understanding of what Islam is about. They don't all agree on that. If they can't agree upon the line of descendancy of the Prophet, then they have other sectarian disagreements also. And this idea that Muslims don't kill Muslims, and it's only the person on the outside that will be killed. If they're killing Muslims, that means that they're not Islamic, is nonsense. And I have to raise the question, what is that? What is the intent of that? What's the intent of that misdirectional comment? Because that has nothing to do with whether or not you are a Muslim or not. A Muslim is a person that takes the 13 words as an oath of faith in the belief that's required of all practitioners of Islam. And that is, there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is a prophet of Allah, or Muhammad is his prophet. Be 13 words. And all Muslims pledge that. It's just like when you go to the Christian church. You go to Christian church, and they say the doors of the church are open. And the minister goes down and asks you whether or not you have decided to take the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, and you say yes. And if you're a Baptist, you have to be willing to be baptized. Some may wash your feet, but you got to have, there are certain things required for you to claim that you are a Christian. You can't become a Christian and say that you are an atheist, or claim that you're a Christian and say that you're not willing to abide by the tenets of Christianity. And of course, in my church, pay your tithe. That's required. So there are certain things you have to do, right, in terms of whether or not you are that or not. And it's always going to be about professing a certain belief in the tenets of that religion. So to say that they're Islamic, I don't think that's really what's going on here. I think something else going on underneath the surface. And I think what's taking place under the surface is the president is hiding, throwing a stone, which that wouldn't be unusual, and hiding his hand. The president's very good at that. I mean, what I saw him doing in that speech Wednesday was that the president was saying that they're not Islamic and they're not a state. Well, their name is Islamic State. So if they're not Islamic and they're not a state, then they don't exist. we don't have a problem. And the president was calling them junior varsity, so that means that we don't have to worry about them. Yet he's building a coalition around them being a problem, and sent John Kerry over there to form a coalition to take these these junior varsity players that are not a problem, not a state, not Islamic, and take them down. I'll tell you what really raised my suspicion about the intent here is that all the coalition members, and I said this in my post on Facebook, all the coalition members are reluctant to get involved, and there's one country that's really dying to get off the sideline and get involved, and the president does not want them involved. Really two nations, but one in particular doesn't want to get them involved, and is in fact trying to overthrow their government. And surprise, 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 if you take my analysis of what's going on over there, which is that this president is putting, taking out secular governments and putting radical Islamics in their places, then you're not surprised, or shouldn't be surprised, that Syria is a nation that they will not let get involved, which tells me a lot about what this campaign is really about. I was saying in one of my posts earlier than the one I posted before I came to the studio, I was just waiting to see what they're going to do in terms of how do you reassign yourself back into doing what has already happened in Libya. You remember that's where Benghazi is, and we lost 4 Americans there, which they were not killed under Gaddafi, who took out of power. They were killed when when we made it possible for the radical Islamists to take over in Libya. There was no problem. We hadn't had an ambassador killed and 3 other Americans killed in Libya, in Benghazi, but that was not a problem. It was a problem under what this president put in place. And then the Muslim Brotherhood, which was brought into power because of what Obama did over in Egypt. And this is really quite interesting here because we had in Egypt a person that had been an ally of the United States for the last 35 years, ever since Anwar Sadat was murdered. Killed because Anwar Sadat had the wherewithal and really the courage to go to Camp David and give Carter the only thing that was consequential during his administration, which was the peace accord between Israel and Egypt. It is hard for the Arab world to fight Israel up front as nations because without Egypt in the mix, it can't be done because Egypt is the most populous of the Arab states in the Middle East, and if they're not on board, you can forget it because of the firepower they're facing from Israel. So when Carter brought Egypt out of that alliance with other Arab states and then had them sign with Begin, I think it was, the peace accord between Israel and Egypt, then that was a major move on his part. Of course, Anwar Sadat, who signed it, paid for it with his life. But the thing that really is interesting is that once Sadat had been assassinated, his presidential, the person that succeeded him, his presidential successor came in, and he could have very well torn up that accord that they had. He didn't sign it, so he could have torn it up and gone back to business as usual and to the status quo that existed before that was in fact signed. He didn't do that. And by not doing that, that made the peace terms more substantial than if he had come in having a person assassinated before he took office. If he had come in and torn that up, he would have been applauded in the Arab world. But he came in and kept the accords in place. This person was overthrown by this president. And somebody, somewhere, at some time, got to ask the question, why? I mean, why did that happen? And I think if you really look for an answer, you have to go back to June the 4th, 2009. Because I think that that's where we can actually see a change having already occurred in the foreign policy of the United States. That's where President Obama, on his apology tour, went over to Egypt, to Cairo, and spoke at the oldest university on the African continent, the University of Al-Azhar, which I saw when I was over there in 1984. And I was walking the streets with no problem. I wouldn't walk the streets in Egypt right now to save my life, particularly if they, of course, they know that you're not from Egypt because of the physicality of the people there and the ones that are here. The physicality is different. And to walk over there now, you're risking your life and being kidnapped, and then you're over there with ISIS and things you're seeing happening to James Foley and the Haynes that was just decapitated. That becomes possible. But that was no problem in '84 when I went over there. And I went over there and walked all the streets behind some of the, in some alleys of alleys. In fact, guys would motion me to come over here and saying, psst, and motion me to come over here. And I'm already in the alley, and that guy's called me into the alley of the alley. But I was after a sale, so I mean, it's a possibility of saving some money. So I went in there, and the guys would assure you, no problem, don't worry. And we went in those alleys of alleys, and there was no problem. And that was under Anwar Sadat. I wouldn't dare do that under the ones who are in power right now, although the Muslim Brotherhood was taken out of power after Obama made it possible to assume power. They were taken out by the military, who was doing the people's bidding because they didn't want them in there either. But Obama helped put them in there. and insisted on June the 4th, 2009, when he went on his apology tour and spoke at the University of Al-Azhar, this president insisted against Hosni Mubarak's better wishes to have the Muslim Brotherhood present. I think that's an announcement this president made at that time, that the foreign policy of the United States is going to, in fact, change. And Mubarak, an ally of 35 years, was, in fact, overthrown by the Obama administration. Somebody got to explain that. And I don't think you can explain it in terms of talking about you want to bring about democracy, because what you put in its place was worse than what you took out. And if this was a serious effort right now, if this is not a continuation of the foreign policy of this administration to put radical Islamists in the place of these secular leaders, then why has this president not gone after Iran, who is in fact developing a nuclear bomb? And everybody on the sideline, I read some articles by Thomas Sowell, who I think has been the clearest one I read on the potentiality, what that means. Potentially what it means is that it's a total game changer if that happens. But that doesn't seem to be an impediment for this president. He doesn't seem like he's trying to stop that. But he's over here trying to overthrow Syria. Why? That's a question that got to be asked. Because the question is, why are these secular leaders being thrown out of power? Gaddafi, not a good guy, but no threat to the United States. Hosni Mubarak, another dictator, but no threat to the United States. I think that's important. Are they posing a threat to the United States? And if not, why are they thrown out of office and someone's put in there that does pose a threat to the United States? Somebody has got to answer that question. And we don't have any answers right now because nobody is looking for any answers to that question. I mean, I do have an answer to it. And I wrote about part of it on my wall. I don't think this is benign. And we've got to look a little bit more deeply, and some of you are, a lot of you are, because we're seeing the numbers indicating that the change we're seeing is not the change that we voted for. We wanted change. We didn't want this kind of change. But we're getting it nevertheless. And the change we're getting on the domestic front is discombobulating the whole nation from within on the domestic level. And outside, we are lessening the power of the country in the international arena. Nothing that's going on is furthering the ends of the national security interests of this country. And because the score is 100% on one side and 0 on the other, you cannot have all of this going on 100% to the detriment of the country and this be by happenstance. In fact, I was reading an article, I quoted this article that I was referring to in my Facebook post. And I was saying that everybody's talking about the president leading from behind. I don't know why that's an issue. You can lead from the front, the side, you can lead from behind. If you're leading, I don't care where you're standing. That's not an issue with you. The question is, what's the script? And what direction is the leadership going in? I mean, we ain't looked at the direction. We're looking at, well, the president's over here leading from behind. Okay, fine. As long as somebody's leading and the direction is right, that doesn't bother me about where he's standing. Standing behind, standing in front, stand wherever you're standing is not a problem. The question is, where is the leadership headed? That's what I want to know. Where are we going? And why are we going there? And why are we going to some places we've never been before? I want to know another thing too. Why is it that we cannot get any of our quote unquote allies to support us? I mean, this is about their security. They're cutting off the heads of people in Britain, and David Cameron is telling us that they are willing to pretty much wave us to the battlefield, and they support us. But when I look down that list to find out, okay, what areas are you supporting us in? And a lot of that was NA. It didn't apply because they're not supporting this effort. And the reason why they're not supporting it is what David Cameron is over there doing, talking about how surprised he is that the people in the that's over there in Syria that was talking about killing this one person. They were talking about how he was so surprised that this person had a British accent. You know what that means? It means that the person that had the British accent was not imported from Britain, from some other part of the world. You don't have a British accent unless you're born in Britain. If you are born in Afghanistan, you got an Afghanistanian accent. This person had a British accent. That means that that person was born on the soil of Great Britain. But David Cameron was surprised, and is surprised, that there are these fighters in Britain that is over there with ISIS cutting off the heads of his own citizens, their own citizens, in Britain. Now, we're not supposed to have remembered there was a person that killed a person in London in the middle of the street in daytime and stabbed the person to death, and did so because the person was wearing a British uniform. This is a Muslim that did this. And the word then went out after that was over, David Cameron's government, telling these soldiers not to wear their uniform off base because that would be considered provocative to Muslims. This is not in Saudi Arabia. This is in London, England. This is in England this is taking place. There are people in London that are intimidated going into where Muslims are located, and when they go into those areas, the women are putting scarves on because they understand the danger of what would happen if they go in there and their hair's not covered in Britain, in England, in London. This is not the Middle East. And David Cameron, despite every indication that they got an Islamic problem in England, the problem that is written about in the book by Mark Steyn called America Alone, where he has as a subheading in the book, The End of America as We Know It, and on the front cover he has a map of the globe, and the globe has flags in it, and all the flags in that globe are the Islamic flag surrounding the U.S. flag, and he means by that America Alone, meaning that they're pretty much out there by themselves. America's out there by itself. And so David Cameron is surprised that this could go on, yet they're not willing to stand strongly against ISIS, although that's been their citizens who have been targeted, because if they show a strong stand by going into a Muslim country, there are Muslims inside of Britain that has a problem with that. And the same thing is true of France under Hollande. Same thing is true under Merkel in Germany. And when I was in Africa, I talked to some people from Spain, where they had to admit that they had their own 911 on March the 4th, 2011, when the same thing, not the same thing, but when they had their own 911, when they bombed the railway in Spain, in objecting to the Spanish government's policy in the Muslim countries in the Middle East. And the government that was named the Popular, it's called the Popular Front, was thrown, that happened on a Thursday, was thrown out of power when they had the voting that following Sunday. So they had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday went to the polls, those voters, understanding got a problem inside of Spain, wanted to calm things down, went to the poll 3 days later after that bombing had occurred, after Spain's 9/11 had taken place, and they went and voted the Popular Front government out of power and put in there the Socialist Workers' Party. Within 3 days, one bomb did it. And they got an Islamic problem inside of Europe, these European countries, and they're afraid to get involved in it. But David Cameron's surprised that there are Muslims over in Syria fighting against Assad, and this one that was there standing over James Foley had a British accent. I don't know why he's surprised. I'm not surprised. And I don't think anybody else should be surprised either, because it's been written about. There's a book out that I'm in the middle of it right now. I'm just getting really into the heart of the book. And it's called, the subtitle is When Europe Slept. Because there's the Islamization of Europe going on right now. And there are a lot of people, Mark Stein being one, and there's some others writing about it as well. I mean, they're now calling Europe Eurabia, because it's pretty much a done deal. Mark Stein shows it from a demographic standpoint. The numbers, the birth rate. Over here, we sold the idea that we got a population explosion. Paul Ehrlich's books back in the 70s talking about there's a population explosion. We got to control our population. So the West bought into controlling the population, and while that's going on through abortion and things like that, where we aborted, 55 to 59 million children in this country? Well, the numbers are going down. We still at replacement levels right now in the United States. Even though that's going on, we are right at the replacement level of our population. So we're not as much in danger as Europe is, because we got the 2.1 births for every woman in woman in our population. You have to have 2.1 replacement for every woman that you have in your society. Well, Europe is like 1.1 on the average. The Muslim replacement is like 3.1. And so what's happening in Europe is Islam is a insurgency that they're looking at across the way at ISIS and saying that's where the problem is. There's the problem being incubated on the land of those European countries. And you can forget this stuff that you're talking about, saying that the problem is ISIS or it's bin Laden and it's ISIL and Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah and Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, which are the symptoms of the problem. As if there's no ideology in place. In fact, that was one person that I was reading the comments by James Foley's brother. Now, he just had his brother decapitated. And he comes out and says that it's not the religion. So let me get this straight. It's just ISIS just out there calling itself the Islamic State, but there's no ideology that they're actually going by. It's just al-Zakari over there in the mountain somewhere that's inspiring that. And they told us before he was the leader of Al-Qaeda. That has been pushed to the side, by the way, because they weren't moving fast enough. They're telling us before al-Zakari took over the Al-Qaeda operation, it was bin Laden that was the inspiration. And then when the Navy SEAL Team 6 went in, allegedly, and took bin Laden out, I take their word for it. I don't know if bin Laden was there or not. Somebody got killed there. But before you get the evidence, it was destroyed. So We don't have the DNA. Or if they have it, they're not sharing it. But somebody, was killed in that insurgency. We organized when I say we organized the military organized this insurgency, and the Navy team, SEAL Team 6 went in there and took bin Laden or whoever that was in that particular compound out. They said that he was inspiration. Okay, well, he's no more. But we've not seen anybody packing up and going home. So that can't be it. Sorry, it can't be it. If that were the case, then we shouldn't have this problem now. We should not have the Al-Qaeda cells dividing into these other channels is going into. And if you notice it, what's happening is that above all the groups, there's a Muslim Brotherhood, and then it metastasized into Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah and Hamas. Now we got the ISIS group, and we don't know what we'll have that comes after that that's even more radical than that group is. But that makes it more hard to get to this problem, because the cells are smaller, and therefore it makes it more difficult to resolve the problem, because it's not just in one place under one organization umbrella. I mean, al-Zakari is over there in, I guess, in the mountains. That's what they tell us. They're in the mountains over there in Afghanistan. Everybody's in these mountains. And they're posing a danger without any airplanes. And if you say, as the president said, that there is that IS, that stands for Islamic State, is not Islamic, then it's not a state, then what state is giving them those weapons? Because if you're not a state, you don't have land. And since land is required for factories, you don't have any factories. And if factories are required for making machine guns, you don't have any factories developing weapons of war. So then, if we're not at war with ISIS because they're not a state and they're not Islamic, which means they don't exist if all of that is true, yet they say that they are that, then the question is, what state is it that we are fighting? Because one thing is crystal clear, and that is the state is involved in it. And if we say that that they're not a state, then we need to ask the question, Mr. President, then what state are we talking about then? Because some state has to be providing their weapons. They're not making them in those caves. You can bank on that. That's not what's happening. And I wasn't even impressed when the president said that his number one priority is to make the American people and keep the American people safe. I don't know how you felt about that. But when I heard those words, I couldn't help but cringe, because I remember 9/11 very well, as if it happened yesterday. It's just like November the 22nd, 1963 in my mind. I can tell you exactly where I was when I heard the news and what I was doing. So it's riveted in my mind about that occasion. It's like it happened September the 1st, 2001, 9/11. But in my mind, it's like it happened yesterday. And I remember the reports about what was going on with those 3 planes, 2 of which were aimed at buildings in New York, the World Trade Center, in which 2 planes went into the one building. One plane went into the Pentagon, and another plane where you had these heroic persons on the plane that was in Pennsylvania. Those 4 planes were hijacked, and the only one that saved any Americans in those hijackings were other individual Americans, because that plane was heading for Washington. In fact, they had already gone into the bunkers in the nation's capital. 10 members of the Congress, you have to leave right now, going under the in the bunkers that are made for those kinds of siren occasions, where the country's under attack at its center. They weren't able to do anything to save anybody out here. What happened on that plane was that individuals did it. And my point I'm getting to is that the president's job is not number one job to keep us safe. In fact, the president can't even do that job. What keeps you safe is the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. There's no government that can keep you safe. If you think that that's not true, go to these urban areas and look and see what's happening in those urban centers. And then listen to the person over there in Milwaukee, by the way, the one man that has, the one sheriff that has the wherewithal to tell the truth. And he said to the people in Milwaukee, I can't think of this man's name, but I have a lot of respect for him. He said that we can't protect you. You've got to be able to protect yourself until we get there. And I have so much respect for him, because when Eric Holder, the Attorney General, another combatant in the Obama administration, this man is not trying to do anything good on behalf of this country. Eric Holder, that went down to Ferguson to stir things up down there, and said we should not wait for the trial. We can hear what the evidence is. We don't want the evidence in this case here. We got some saying that Michael Brown had his hands up. We got some said he was shot in the back. And we got some that said they were rushing the police officer. We have reports that the police officer was in fact struck and had some damage done to his face. We got all kinds of reports out there. We don't know what happened. But the Holder has already gotten involved in investigating the police department as if he knows what occurred. And then the report comes out that they haven't had a police shooting of a black person in Ferguson in 2 decades. This was something out of the norm. But you would think they would say, well, let's wait and see what happened. But now they rush into judgment, because that's the kind of administration that we have to deal with. Holder should be trying to make sure that the people's rights are maintained in this country. Not to railroad people because he doesn't like something that went on that he doesn't even know what the facts are in the case. And we haven't had a trial yet. But you will not know that by this person's efforts so far, because they've already indicted the officer. And if he did the things that's being important to him about where he has capability, then let the letter of the law decide that. We don't want mobs deciding it, and we don't want vigilantes doing it. We want this Attorney General following mobs to do it either. But it's that kind of thing that we have going on here. They can't keep the American people safe, not even if they wanted to, which is not what they're doing, trying to do anyway. Because a lot of what they're doing is endangering the American people, right inside the country. We're not served by having mobs put up against each other, having people put up against each other in this country, mobs being formed and down the streets. How many people in those stores had their windows broken out? How many of those persons were safe? How many residents were in danger by this kind of conduct? Government's not going to keep us safe. What the government needs to do is keep us free. That's something they have a direct handle in, a hand in, because what government does can keep us free, because only government can take our liberties from us. You might have it from an outside source coming in, and we have to have the military their job is to stop that. But inside the country, the only one that can take away our freedom in this country is our government. So keeping us free is a requirement of government, and keeping us safe is our responsibility. Law enforcement, yes, but we have the right to defend ourselves in this country too. The right to bear arms, and that's what keeps you safe. All of you have, if you have any kind of understanding of what keeps you safe, all of you have something in your homes you can use in case your safety is in fact in jeopardy. Some of you out there carrying have a license to carry a concealed weapon to keep you safe. That's why you carry it, because the government cannot be there and do not have intuition to be able to guess where you're going to be at a given point in time and guess what the problem is going to be once you get there. Can't determine that. Can't be in all places at one time, and therefore cannot keep you safe. I don't know why they keep saying that, as a matter of fact, unless they have another hidden agenda. Government must keep you safe. So what does that mean? We don't therefore need our weapons? We don't need to abide by the Second Amendment? What does that mean? And what does it mean for the military to be marching back over here and going into the Middle East with no help, and then the government over there that's willing to help because their nation, their nationality, their sovereignty is under attack? They can't join the coalition. Syria is being attacked by ISIS and Al Qaeda, but they can't join the coalition, and that raises a tremendous suspicion, which is what I was writing about. Okay, well, go read the article, because that article, I think, is one of the ones that I really think that's one of my better ones. Somebody has written on the post already and said that was one of my best. I try to make them all something different that nobody else is writing about. I'm not interested in being a parrot. So when I write something on the Facebook, I'm trying to write something that no one else has thought to write about. Otherwise, I'm just out there chewing the same cabbage that everybody else is chewing. I'm not interested in being a parrot. And so when I write, I'm trying to write from another point of view, away from what everybody else is saying. Although I read what everybody else is saying, because they're writing from a point of view that I'm not writing from. And that's why I read them. And I hope when I write, I hope people read what I'm writing, because I'm not writing from what they're saying. We can read, if all I'm saying is what they're saying, just read what they're saying and just understand that I'm a ditto head. I'm just simply putting quotation marks around what's already out there. But I wrote about the energy that's out there right now, where we are in fact being used as mercenaries. And that's only happened one time before in American history, where a country is used as a mercenary group by another country. Their soldiers being used as mercenaries, in which they asked to pay for it. And that's only happened one other time. That was under Bush 1, when they had us going into Kuwait. And we up there paying, they are enlisting our soldiers. This is no laughing matter. This is serious business here. Had our soldiers enlisted in fighting with Kuwait, fighting for liberation of Kuwait, and getting us to pay for the fight that liberated their country. And they said that, as a matter of fact. Had one person, if you remember it, had one person that went before the camera and was crying and saying, oh, and they saw Saddam Hussein's soldiers take the babies out of the incubators and smash them on the floor, and she was crying, and woe is me, and the American people getting all teary-eyed, and we couldn't understand the report, and we had to go get this guy out of power, and we can't have this. This barbarity has to be stopped. It was all made up. A news reporter decided to call the ambassador's house and asked for this girl, and she was there. He just had a some reason believe that was a concocted story, and it was. But we bought it, and then we fought to get the Iraqis out of there. In fact, we sucker punched Saddam Hussein. Madeleine Albright did it. You don't catch these people doing these things because we don't pay attention to these politicians. They sucker punched Saddam Hussein. Act like they were disinterested. Oh, we have no interest in that over there. That's what they're doing. And then as soon as we went into Kuwait, the president then boxed him in and then made it impossible for him to back out of there. Why? Because Saddam Hussein had been fighting with our weapons against the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini in Iran. We put weapons in both their hands. Khomeini was the Ayatollah that took power in 1979, and then Saddam. And they were fighting it out for 10 years. But when that war came to a close, Saddam Hussein got our weapons in his hands. And we got to get those weapons out. That guy had the fourth largest army, military machine in the world, and he's over there in the Middle East, and we couldn't have that. And they sucker punched him. Told him, we didn't care what you, that's between you and Kuwait. And Kuwait over there doing diagonal drilling into the oil fields of Iraq, diagonally drilling under the ground. So Saddam went in there to stop that. And we said, we're not interested in it. That's not our problem. Then we went in there. They boxed him in there. We couldn't get out. And then when they began to meet with his ambassador, Aziz, they gave Aziz a note that was in undiplomatic language telling him to get his so-and-so out of there, which you don't talk that way in diplomatic language, so you couldn't take that back to your president. Aziz, I said, I can't take this back to my president because the language is so vulgar. He didn't say vulgar, he said it's not diplomatic language. But Bush had told him to get his so-and-so out of there. And of course that meant he could not come out under those terms, otherwise he comes out like a weasel. And then he comes out as a quisling, and then he's in problems. He got problems in his country, and that can't happen. So they boxed him in, and then took him down to a certain level, but kept him in power, thinking if they weaken him, then the National Guard, the elite guard, the Republican Guard in a Muslim country. Okay, well, they thought that if they weakened him enough, then the people inside would take him out of power, and then therefore the thumbprint of him being taken out of power would not fall upon the United States. That was what was going on, but they forgot that Saddam is a dictator. And until you finish him off, there are people that may rise up, but not knowing if they're going to succeed or not. And a lot of folks are not going to rise up because they're not sure if you're going to win. And then they didn't recognize that the man had been putting away money every year in the event that this very thing would happen. And they had a house full of money, American dollars stacked up to the ceiling. And so they weakened him, but he was able to recover because there was all this money in American dollars that he had been saving up over the years. And when it came down to being able to pay his soldiers, he was able to do that. I mean, stayed in power because he had the money to pay those military. I mean, they're not mad as long as they get their check. Now, some other things they were suffering out in the general population. What Saddam did was make sure that the military got paid. In other words, the ones protecting him and keeping him in power, they got paid. That's been our foreign policy. And we have it no better under this president than we've had it. In fact, in some ways, it's worse under this president. And I don't think we can just attribute all of what we're seeing to the incompetence of this president. As I said in my post, I think a lot of it has to do with this president's Muslim background. And I'm not saying he's a Muslim. I don't know what his religion is. He didn't go to church, so I don't know what his. And when he went to church, he was cursing the country out. His pastor up there swearing in the pulpit about America. So that don't sound like Christianity to me. So I don't know what his religion is, and that's his decision. My point is the foreign policy is something that we need to look at, and I don't think anybody out there can show any evidence that the foreign policy on this administration over the last 6 years has served as well. Okay, I came here to talk about two topics, and I got a little carried away with that one, because that one is, we got to watch what's going on here. We have to pay strict attention to what's going on here, because our soldiers, God bless their hearts, every last one of them, our military is being put under the hammer by being asked to do work that has nothing to do with the security of the nation that they represent. It's just amazing that we're not raising questions about what we're asking our military to do. And then when they come back here having gotten shot up, nobody raised a question about why is the VA operating the way they're operating, it operates with our wounded warriors. It's amazing to me that goes on. And can't get therapy, can't see the doctor, the VA is run down, is underfunded. Why is that? Something is wrong with that picture. In other words, I shouldn't say something's wrong. There's nothing right about that picture. Because these people went over there and fighting for the ideals they say the country is fighting for, and the politicians are committing them to these battles without being clear about what is going on in the background, and something is certainly going on in the background. And they come back here with the wounded warriors, and then when they get back here, look what happens to them. And why is that going on? I mean, why did they, when they had the government closed down, why did they have the World War II veterans couldn't see their memorial? Those guys are in their 80s and 90s, and some of them are not going to be around. Didn't know if they're going to live the next day. And they closed down the memorial because we had not seen the government shut down. And we weren't saying we don't see any change. So then they showed the change by not letting them go see the memorial. And that bothered us, so now we want the government open back up. But it never shut down in the first place. That kind of thing is going on. We got to raise some questions why that is going on in our country. And we got to be concerned about this. And I'm going to write about it. I know I'm putting myself in jeopardy by doing it, but I'm going to write about this and talk about this because we've got to get control of what's happening in our country. And we don't have a handle on it. Something is going on in the backdrop. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just don't see how we can avoid seeing that something is going on that's awry that we're not being told up front by those who are purported to be this nation's leaders. And there are some serious questions got to be raised here about and I hate to say this, but some real serious questions got to be raised here about the patriotism of the people in Washington. And I say that also not just because of what's happening in this case right here, but I said because I don't see anybody concerned really about why patriots were being targeted by the IRS. The Internal Revenue Service were targeting those that had the word patriotism in their name. And why Edward Snowden. I think Snowden's a patriot. I don't think Snowden is trying to hurt the country. I think Snowden is a patriot trying to say the government is doing things that it should not do under the auspices of this document right here. It's called, I don't know if they'll ever talk about it in Washington, but it's called the Constitution of the United States. I have not heard anybody talk about this document right here. And Donald Trump, let me say this to you about what you're advocating. I understand what you're saying. You say that you will give Obama the right to be on the golf course and for the rest of his life. Any golf club he wants to join, you'll pay for it. Pay for all of his golfing that he wants to have for the rest of his life if he would in fact resign. I understand what you're saying, but Obama is not going to resign. Not when we've got 2 more years to do what he's been doing for the last 6 years, which is really undermining the national security of this country. I mean, there's no question in my mind about that. That we have an enemy combatant in the White House that our commander-in-chief is not patriotic. And why do I say that? I say it because I have no evidence to say otherwise. If the other thing was true and I felt there was some evidence to back it up, I have no problem saying that. And because I do say it, it creates problems. Even when I was traveling outside the country, I was just really amused at the airport. I was getting ready. I normally go to the that little thing they have, the computer they have when you check yourself in at the airport. I normally go to do that myself, but this guy was at the counter, so I go up there and told me to come to the counter. And he wants to process my passport, make sure I have the right papers to get on the plane since I'm going out of the country. I'm not going out of the country from here, but I was going out of the country once I hit the next airport, which was Chicago. So we had to check the credentials here at the point of embarkation. I'm departing from this airport in the city. So he checked my credentials. But it was really interesting to watch him as he was looking at the screen, typed in the information, looked at the screen. Then all of a sudden, he looks at the screen, and he looks back at my passport, back at the screen, back at the airport, back at the passport. Then he typed some more things in, some more information in, read that, looked back at my passport again. So I didn't think that he was reading where it said, go around there right now and plant a big wet one on that guy's forehead, because we love this guy. I don't think that was on the screen. I could be wrong now. I got ready to ask this guy. I mean, it was so long before he actually gave me my tickets. I was going to ask the guy, so do I get on the plane or not? I didn't think he was going to let me on the plane, John, but he finally gave me the tickets. But I mean, he kept looking at my passport and back at the information on the screen, and kept typing information in there to what that brought up. That allowed by the law, by the NSA laws that they give them. They can't tell you what they're reading. If they do that, they violate. It's a federal law, maybe a felony. So they can't tell you what they're reading. But I tell you by his face, that was not on that screen. I didn't read it now, but it was not on that screen. Go around there right now and shine that guy's shoes before he gets on that plane. And make sure you shake his hand and go around there and give him a big bear hug. It didn't say that. Now what it said, I don't care what it said. Look, nobody's going to shut me up, not in this lifetime. And I really don't care if they like it or not. I know they don't like me, so, that's just not going to happen. But I'm not here to be popular, but I'm going to tell the truth as I know it. I'm sorry. I got too many years where I could have been thrown out with no pension, and I could not do what they asked me to do. And I told them that I couldn't do it. And I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to, look. So anyway, I'm just telling you that we got a problem here. And we got to find out why this problem continues to surface in this country. Somebody, that one book, Dude, What Happened to My Country, that's what Michael Moore is saying in his book, from his standpoint. I'm not going to call anybody a dude. I got a little bit more respect for the persons than that. But I would like to know what happened to my country, because this ain't it. I was born in one country, and I'm living in another country right now. This is not the same country. I don't care who says otherwise. This is not, unless I was blinded by what I didn't see coming up. It was not this. Whatever it was, whether or not I had a good handle on it in my immature years, because I'm grown up now. Very little gets past me now. I just don't think that this is the same place. Pay attention out there. Don't let anything get in your way. Continue to look at the situation going on in the Middle East. And don't forget, as always, to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, You'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.